Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of From Us to You, US Gamers all-purpose video game podcast show. I'm your host for this one, Bob Mackey, and today is another great discussion that will be led by me. And first, we're going to jump over to Kat with her topic, unless that's too direct for you, Kat.
No, that's plenty direct. It's
Okay.
awesome. Okay.
I just wanted to get that intro out of the way.
Oh, you did a great job,
Thank
acting
you.
host. Anyway, so
I haven't done this before.
well, I mean, never. I mean, you do have two podcasts.
Never. I was like, let's go with who's on my left, but then I was like, wait, you might not be on my left with how Nadia is looking at the screen. It's very complicated.
So you're in the East Bay. I'm in San Francisco. So on the map, on your left. But
Yes, depending which way
go.
you're holding the map.
yes. Anyway, today's topic that I'm going to be talking about is Doom, which, I don't know, it's been getting pretty good buzz. Have you guys been hearing a lot about Doom?
I've been hearing some pretty good things about it. I have a few friends who are really into it right now, and
Yeah.
they say it reminds them of the original, which is good praise. It's still a great game.
Yeah, I have too. I've actually been tempted to buy it, and as much as I like video games, very rarely buy a $60 game, so that means something. I haven't bought it yet, though, so maybe it doesn't mean that much, but I've been thinking about it.
I think the NeoGAF thread refers to it as the Fury Road of first-person shooters,
That's
okay.
great.
which, if that's actually the case, and that's like the highest possible praise I think you
Well-
can give to a first-person shooter.
Fury Road is the Dark Souls of movies, let's not forget. There, drink your drink now, everybody, at home.
Yeah. So anyway, I've been hearing similarly great things, and it brings me back to a couple of years ago when the Wolfenstein reboot came out. And Wolfenstein very deliberately did two things. First, it was a single-player campaign experience. And second, it very deliberately went back to kind of the 90s in terms of presentation and everything. And I was reflecting on how, 90s FPSs, they went away for a long time. They were, pretty passé. I would say, the dividing line between kind of the 90s FPS and the more modern FPS was maybe when Half-Life came out.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Was that, 1999?
That was 98, I believe. That was, the biggest year for modern gaming, so it kind of fits into that fold.
Yeah, we got Unreal Tournament the year after that, and Quake 3 Arena was coming around. But first-person shooters were definitely growing up by the time Half-Life came out. And then, of course, Half-Life 2, presaged the much more set-piece driven FPS. And now, and then Call of Duty was another big change. And for a long time, a lot of our FPSs just wanted to be Call of Duty again. And the smaller games, like Bulletstorm and things, started to go away. And Titanfall seemed to herald an era where maybe the single-player first-person shooter started to die out, and we had mostly multiplayer shooters, but that has not come to pass, I don't think. Overwatch will not have a single-player campaign, but I sort of feel like single-player campaigns are important in a lot of ways, and it takes a really, really special multiplayer shooter to be able to overcome the lack of a single-player campaign, because especially on consoles, there are just so many people who simply won't buy a first-person shooter without a really good single-player campaign. And then the other thing is, a really terrific single-player campaign can kind of sell itself, So I'm kind of curious what you guys think about on that front.
I am definitely a loner when it comes to gaming. I far prefer playing by myself than even playing locally, never mind online multiplayer. So if I don't have a good single player campaign outside of say Overwatch, which I will try, I am not sold. That is actually one of the big reasons I'd really like to get into Final Fantasy XIV, because it seems like such a rich world, full of so many fun things. And I understand that I can play it single player, but then I hear about oh, I went up against this monster, this raid, blah blah blah, with all my friends, and it's what am I missing if I don't do multiplayer? Can I do this single player? Because I'd really, really prefer to just be by myself.
You could do that mostly single player. You just need to actually play with 3 other people when you do dungeons. So you're automatically paired with people when you do that part of it. But for the most part, it is a single player game if you want to treat it like that.
Yeah, because I'd really like to get into that, because I don't know what it is. Even playing with my friends, I'm kind of awkward. I just like to hang out on a couch and be lost in my own thoughts and not have to be responsible for anyone. Splatoon was good for that. It was very anonymous.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's kind of how I prefer my multiplayer games, where I don't have to actually do a lot of communicating. Like I have a game group, my college friends, we play games every week. But I also like to just after work slip into a multiplayer game where I can be anonymous, where I don't have the energy to talk to strangers or defend myself or explain my actions. Like, I'm sorry guys, I didn't know. I just like the anonymity of things like Splatoon, things like even Overwatch. You can't talk to each other, but no one was harassing me, no one was angry at me, which was great. But in terms of the single player campaign, I think we're approaching a kind of a backlash to the last decade of games where it's like, no, if we make a single player game and it's got to tell a story, it's got to be important. Games are serious, guys. Games have grown up, etc. But Doom is like, no, no, a game can be silly and fun, and you don't need like Kevin Spacey to show up or whatever. You can just blow up zombies and cacodemons or whatever with your shotgun, and it'll be fine. So
Yeah.
I think we are once again approaching like, oh, games can be dumb fun. It's cool. Like we don't have to be ashamed of this, and Doom is really emblematic of that. And I think that's what its single player campaign really represents. It's not trying to tell an important story at all, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And if you
Maybe
think
the,
about
maybe it's,
if you think
it
about
could be
what
telling the Doom comic book story for all I know, and then I'd be very interested.
Rip and tear.
Yeah.
I heard Rip and Tear for the first time the other day. I didn't
you really?
actually know
Your
that
life has
meme.
been incomplete.
Well, my life is now complete.
Yes.
That comic is a classic.
Well, you think about how
Nice one.
different Doom was a decade ago, because it was in 2004, I think, which is crazy to think about, when
Yeah,
Doom
that's
3
the-
came
that's-
out. And when Doom 3 came out, it was like two things. Like, first of all, it was a technological showcase. And I think at that time, people still thought of Doom as a leader in the FPS space in terms of innovation. And so I sort of feel like there was a lot of pressure on them to like really hit it out of the park in terms of like design,
Yeah.
and especially match up to kind of like what the innovations had been happening in that space at that time. And so you got stuff like, you got audio logs talking about how hell was unleashed on Mars, and you had like it went a lot more horror. Like it had much more horror bent with stuff like jumping out at you. And generally it was actually trying to tell a story. And it feels like we have now reached a point, as Bob was kind of saying, where first-person shooters are like, maybe Doom is secure in its identity as a first-person shooter, where it's going, yeah, we're a nostalgia trip. We're not trying to be like a leader in the space. We know exactly what we are.
Well, even the first Doom, if I'm not mistaken, they took pains to make sure that like they were going to have like a whole backstory for the Marine, and they decided at the last minute, you know what? Why bother? We're just gonna, have fun. It's gonna shoot zombie imps.
That's what got me interested, and I realized there are very different games going for very different things, but a friend told me that Uncharted 4, you don't actually get a gun until maybe the third or fourth hour. It takes a few hours of, puttering around, and I was like, okay, I'm immediately not interested in that. But when I heard Doom was like, no, it's a fun, dumb game that you immediately just start shooting things, I'm like, yes, I want to play this. So I think my needs have changed as well as, a lot of people's needs in terms of what they want from a game now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes more than that, though. Like, it's one thing to be stupid fun. Do you guys remember Matt Hazard? Like, Eat Lead Matt Hazard?
That's one of the first games I
yes.
reviewed, unfortunately.
I reviewed that one, too, actually.
Yeah.
No, it may have been for the DS.
One of Will Arnett's least fail-worthy projects, I think.
I mean, it wasn't a great shooter. It was trying to spoof the shooter genre, but it wasn't exactly very well made.
Yeah,
that
it was kind of like the Simpsons game in that it was like, hey, isn't this a bad video game? That's funny. It's like, no, you're actually just a bad video game, and I'm not having fun.
This
yes,
is funny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The reason I bring it up, though, is because it's dumb fun. I mean, it's not trying to be anything more than dumb fun, and I guess a spoof of the shooter genre. But it wasn't especially well designed.
No.
And then, but by all accounts, this current Doom, the new Doom, actually is really well designed. It has, like, people are praising its level design in particular up and down. And you go, oh, well, okay. Extremely well-designed single-player game that is nevertheless a throwback to 90s nostalgia can work really well.
That's good. I'm happy about that.
Yes.
I'm happy we are moving in this direction. There is room for story-based games, and I love them, but I also want there to be room for games where it's like, we just want you to have fun in this world, and, don't worry so much about the story. So I am happy to hear that it is successful, at least I think it is. It seems successful to me.
It seems to be, yeah.
It's getting a lot of buzz on social media and everything, so that's part of the reason that I brought it up.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'm kind of wondering, though, is do you think like that Doom and Wolfenstein, going back to that 90s sort of FPS genre, is kind of isolated to those games because we so completely identify with them with early 90s PC gaming? Or can this kind of be revived as almost a subgenre of the shooter genre?
Huh. I think we're seeing Doom and Wolfenstein come back because games are so expensive, you don't want to back a new game with a new idea. You want to retreat to your Dooms and your Wolfensteins. Just as movies, they're always based on something, and something you're like, that came back. Why is The Man from U.N.C.L.E. a movie now? It's because there are at least 2 million people who will see it because of that affiliation. So they're going with very time-tested properties, but they're trying to do somewhat new things with them. I think it's going to be hard for a publisher or developer to make that kind of idea, or make that kind of experience with a new idea, rather.
I've been kind of racking my mind, and maybe you guys remember it. There was a shooter in the 2000s that was very deliberately a throwback to the 90s.
Serious Sam?
Serious Sam.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That one worked really well for a bit.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's when games were a lot, even in the early 2000s. That game is made by, I think, Eastern European team for very cheap compared to probably what Doom 4 was made with. So I'm just worried. Like, I want the indie space to support that kind of experience, but I think they kind of have their hands tied as to what they can do. Like, Superhot is a example of like a fun single player FPS, but it's also based on a very indie idea. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Superhot at all. It's really cool.
No.
Oh, it's an FPS that the game only moves when you do. So it's sort of like roguelike in a way, in that as you move, other things move. So it's possible to plan out a perfect route through these crazy FPS levels. So that's what the indie space is doing with FPSs. But I don't know. I don't know if that can work in a much larger context in a more expensive game.
Only the indie space would take a first-person shooter and be like, you know what we need to make it into?
You know what we need to do with this?
A roguelike.
But God bless them.
Even if the indie space are the only ones doing that, I'm fine. Like,
yeah.
If they're fun to play, I'll play them. Even if there's no one doing AAA games where you move, where the soldiers move when you move, that's fine. If the indies are doing, I'll live.
Absolutely.
So I believe Nadia wanted to talk about Nintendo's move to Hollywood.
Yes.
Is that correct, Nadia?
That is correct.
And as we've seen throughout history, and I've covered plenty of these movies on my podcast, Retronauts, Hollywood plus video games usually almost always equals disaster. I'm trying to think of if there's anything that worthwhile that came out of that pairing. Can either of you think of
only one that I can think of that's even remotely fun, because going back to what we were talking about earlier, it just doesn't take itself seriously, is Mortal Kombat.
That's true, yeah. It is as stupid as the source material.
It really is. They're like, this is a dumb game where people with forearms beat each other's face in, so you know what? We're going to make a movie about that. And it worked.
I agree with you there, yeah. I mean, I think that was inspired, and also they really did strike when the iron was hot in terms of this thing is popular now. By 95, there's a movie. Instead of like Ratchet and Clank was popular 14 years ago. Let's make that movie.
Let's make it now.
Yeah.
But no, even looking back at Street Fighter had its moments.
For you, the day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
But when I try to watch it now, it's like, I don't watch a Street Fighter movie because I want to watch people shooting guns at each other.
I can watch that movie almost any time. Like, it's just, it strikes the perfect so bad it's good
it really
balance.
Yeah, I will give it that, but in terms of like a shining beacon of what game movies should be, no.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
No.
And they keep making Hitman movies. I don't know why.
What's up with that?
I like Hitman, but it's like, what, now this guy's Hitman? All right,
they
that's
made
fine.
like 2, right?
There might be 3. There's at least 2.
I mean, video game movies have kind of evolved into like, well, we're just going to take, kind of the set piece design and the ultra thin characterization, and we're just going to make a movie that's basically nonstop action.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Maybe the choreography is really good, but beyond that,
When when Silent Hill came out, one girl I worked with at the time, I'm still friends with her, she's a huge Silent Hill fan from the games, and she comes into work one day and she's like, oh my god, you guys have to see this movie. It's amazing, right? So this other friend of mine, whose name is also Nadia, she's not really into games, but she went and she saw the movie, and she came back and she said, that was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. You owe me $10.
That might have been a little too slavish to the source material, actually. I saw that too, and I was like, the character is making these actions only because a similar character made actions in a video game. They make no sense within the context of a movie. It's like a player is controlling her. It's very strange.
Exactly.
But I do feel like that Hollywood is very reluctant to embrace what makes those games good. They're always like backing away from the essential elements of the characters of the world. That's why the Mario Brothers movie is just pure awful garbage. I mean, it's fun in retrospect in terms of just what a colossal misfire it is.
Exactly, but the Mario movie, the thing I love about it, and I think if they kind of went more in this direction, it would have helped, is that I love the sets. And I know they're the wrong kinds of sets, but it's just this amazing world they built up inside of a cement factory of all things.
They made amazing sets for a different movie.
Exactly, that's
exactly. Like another movie should take place here, not the fun, colorful Mario antics.
But if you look at the, I don't know, really boring movie.
Yeah, it's way too long. They don't get their overalls until like minute 100. Probably later.
Monkey.
But something about this news. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you've ever read the Mario movie archives, they go over every movie was supposed to be, and it did make a lot more sense in the context of Mario back in the day.
I like that Bob Hoskins and the guy who was playing Luigi were getting drunk on the set.
Oh, John Leguizamo.
Yeah.
Nobody in that movie was Italian.
But I'll tell you what, though. My father, who knows nothing about video games, he watched the movie with me, and he was like, you know what, I liked that. Because he had no frame of reference, and also Don Lake is in it, and that's one of his favorite actors, but Don Lake is the security dude.
Okay.
But he's like, it was a fun fantasy movie, and of course parts of it don't make any sense. Like, I'm sorry, if you find dinosaur bones underneath New York City and they're showing signs of evolution, you're not going to have to fight a struggle with the mafia about getting that land to dig on. It's not going to happen. But I could see where he was coming from. But as for what makes a good game movie, it's really hard to strike that balance, I guess, because no one's really done it other than Mortal Kombat.
Crisis Core. I mean, not Crisis Core. The stupid Final Fantasy VII movie.
Advent Children.
Advent Children.
Jim Henson's Advent Children.
Nobody would call that a good movie. But it mostly struck a good balance of like lots of fan service.
Exactly.
Lots of callbacks to the movie. Great CG for the time.
I think that's just the case of Japan treating the properties with more respect, as they usually do with their interpretations, either in anime or movies. I mean, not all the time, but a lot of the time you'll see these really faithful adaptations of video games in both movie and anime form, I think, and that would never happen here in America.
Believe it or not, I'm actually looking forward to the Warcraft movie.
And
I say this because A, the CG looks really good. Just from here. B, Blizzard is extremely protective of its properties, and I don't think they would allow a piece of garbage movie to be put out that wasn't faithful to the source material.
That's true. And
3, like, the Warcraft universe, like, it's gotten pretty dumb through World of Warcraft, but the original, kind of lore was solid enough footing for a generic fantasy movie.
Yeah, I can see it working on that level. Like, I don't see how it could fail on that level. I mean, it's got griffins, castles, orcs. It's all you really need.
It seems broad enough that it could be interpreted in many ways and still be okay. It's not a very specific kind of fantasy world. At least, I know I'm going to get killed about this, but I don't think it is, at least.
Yeah. So, maybe Warcraft is the big hope for video game movies.
Could be, but with Nintendo, I'm trying to think, they're very protective, too. And that, especially, I would think now twice as much so since the Mario.
Oh, yeah.
So what's going to come out of this whole movie thing has me very curious. I'm thinking about it, and I can't come up with any really good answers other than maybe Zelda.
I think you can make a really good Pixar-style Mario movie.
You could, actually. I think you're right, and I really hope they go with that.
Where Mario doesn't talk, and they
with that.
They get a lot of gags out of it, where he's just doing the woohoo, ah! Right.
Well, even Japan, like, for years and years, they grew up with that little Mario anime that we never saw the light of day of until the internet came along. And that was okay, too.
What I actually want is like a Marvel style like Nintendo like universe where where at the end of the credits like Mario walks into the Mushroom Castle and Link just turns around and goes yeah, and he goes cut to black.
In any case, it seems as if they are dedicated to not letting happen what happened in the 80s and 90s with their properties, where it's like, oh, the worst animation ever, the worst movies ever, and then they immediately backed away.
That's what happens when you give it to a third-party studio. Yeah. Like, they've learned from Marvel that you just got to bring it in-house and be really protective of it, right?
And I think also the state of children's entertainment has only gotten exponentially better since those dark ages of the 80s and 90s. Yeah. So I feel like the standard is so much higher because there's so much more to choose
from.
The
80s were like the gold standard.
Duh.
Yeah, that's some Gen X propaganda. I'm not watching He-Man or Transformers.
But no, I think a 3D animated Mario film could be a lot of fun. I actually think they should stay away from Zelda and Metroid because I don't know. I think that the only thing you can get out of those movies would be actually kind of cheesy. I think that if you went for something a lot more stylistic and fun with, say, Mario, I mean, actually talking about successful video game movies, I mean, Pokemon. Pokemon is probably the most successful like spin-off video game property that you've seen in the media, where the anime is so identified with the games that it's just like the two are you can't separate the two basically, despite the fact that they're very different from one another. Yeah, and there have been like a billion movies set in that universe, so there you go, right?
It can be done.
It can be done. But...
So we're going to meander over to my topic, and it's a great topic us game writers love to talk about. That's review scores, of course.
It's time for a little inside baseball, everybody.
It's something we only talk about this every month whenever a big game is reviewed poorly. In this case, it's Uncharted 4, which, as we all know, is the best thing since the vaccination for polio, of course. It's beyond reproach. We cannot say anything bad about it. I'm kidding, of course. You're allowed to feel any way you want to about Uncharted 4. But apparently some people took issue with the Washington Post's review of Uncharted 4, and the reviewer scored their review a 4 out of 10 and complained about it by all accounts.
It was a really weird scenario because he didn't score it.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
When it was submitted to Metacritic, it was a 4 out of 10.
Score, which is weird because they have a no score category.
I apologize for that snafu, but that is true. That's why it's so strange. Metacritic interpreted that score as a 4 out of 10. And now there's a petition on change.org to get that score taken out of the Metacritic Metascore, which accounts for all the numbers.
It's still a 93.
Yes, exactly. I'm not sure what to say about this because I used to work for OneUp.com, and back then we had a letter system, and it was always so frustrating to see Metacritic turn a good letter grade into a bad number. Like a B would be like in the 70 range or whatever, because they had no idea what to do with those scores. And I feel like, again, the Metascore does determine a lot of things that I believe are unfair, like bonuses, vacations, whether or not a developer gets to stay together, things like that. I think that's totally not cool. At the same time, though, and this does not go out to any of our listeners because I know you're all reasonable people, but
totally reasonable.
I feel that we all need to just settle down about review scores because this may discredit me, but there are several scores I gave that I wish I could change. And if you ask any reviewer that, they will totally agree with you. And I sincerely believe we will not know the true value of a game until maybe 5 or 10 years later.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this on Retronauts recently. Apologies for if I'm repeating myself, but things like BioShock Infinite, that's a pretty good example. I mean, you're welcome to like it. It's a game with some value to it, but it was universally praised, 9s, 10s everywhere. But when you go back to it now and ask people, they're like, you know what? It kind of let me down. So I feel like you never really know the true value of a game until time has passed. And again, reviews are just a snapshot of a window in time that factors into a lot of things, like what the reviewer is bringing into it, what the expectations are of that moment, what is surrounding that game at the moment. And tons of great games have been reviewed poorly throughout history. Just going back to them and looking back through time, be like, wow, people hated this, but it's such a hidden gem that no one loves. So again, don't take reviews seriously, people, but you should still read our reviews.
Yes.
That's my one caveat. I don't know. How do you guys feel about this? Again, it's something I hate talking about it so much. I feel like I've talked about it on several podcasts. I hate that we have to keep talking about it, but I feel it's important to send that message as to what a review is. It can never be objective. It is, again, a snapshot in time. How do you guys feel about that?
I think a lot about reviews. I think one of the fundamental tensions is that people read video game reviews like they do tech reviews. Like they say they're reading a review of Uncharted 4 like they might read an iPhone 6 review, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're reading a tech review, you're thinking, well, there are certain things that are just objectively true. This game has really good graphics.
Yeah.
This game does these graphics really well. It's not as nebulous as when you're watching a movie and you go, well, I really like the creative choices that they made with this movie. Well, the thing is that a game is not a piece of technology. It's not just a straight-up piece of tech. It's not an iPhone. There are creative choices that are perfectly valid. Some people will take issue with design choices or whatever. But the fact that there are these mechanical things mixed in with these creative choices, in terms of narrative and aesthetic and everything, really jumbles everything. So I feel like people are way more well, I mean, you gave this thing a bad review, but that objectively is just not true. And I'm sorry I keep using the word objective. I know that some people hate it and everything. But and then the other thing is that I think video games, for whatever reason, just by their very nature, are a lot more tribal.
Yeah, they really are.
With a movie, people will go and say, oh, yeah, I really like that movie, or, nah, I didn't really like that movie. I mean, you'll see exceptions like Toy Story 3 had that one bad review that pushed it down from a 100% fresh score.
Oh,
and
right.
people
That guy
lost
is a
their...
professional troll. I think his name is Armand White. He only exists to troll other reviewers, really. He's the worst.
For some reason, people want that 100%. They crave it, and I don't know why. It's validating.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happens when you basically raise up children to be valued by their test scores.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know. I remember I used to read GamePro back in the day, and I would see a review, and when I saw all of the little red explodey faces for a perfect score, I loved it. I was so disappointed.
Exploding faces. Yeah, but again, it's so funny that people treat reviews as these these very reliable, very timeless things. But again, it is just the values of the time, the values of the reviewer, which are just so many variables are worked in. And if you go back to maybe an issue of EGM and you read in a review of Turok 2 and it's it's got the best graphics on the market, you're like, no, it doesn't. I'm living in 2016. So again, it is just the values of the time frozen in a review. And it is, again, everything that reviewers experience in their life, all of their life experience, as they're approaching this piece of media. So
yeah, it's remember, Bob would remember this well, Earthbound was completely destroyed by critics when it came
for sure.
here.
Exactly.
Everyone didn't know what to make of it because we had just come off of Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, and our view was that, a video game should look like these games. They should be serious like these games. They should sound like these games. And of course, Earthbound, completely its own thing. We had no frame of reference because we didn't have Mother. So, and critics were just like, what is this? And it was a shame.
And if you're an overeducated jerk like me, who's kind of seen it all, some things will be less impressive, like, I realize what you're referencing, and I don't think you're doing it very well, or I've seen this idea before. But for some people, that could be the first time they have seen that idea or seen that type of character, and they'll be like, I love this. So, I have a feeling the people who loved Heavy Rain might not have seen all the things David Cage was referencing, everything he borrowed. I did, and I was like, yeah, I get it. I've seen 7 too, David. Let's move on with our lives. So it can never be a perfect thing. It's always going to be an imperfect thing. The more we try to perfect it, the more it's just going to misfire. It's just one person's opinion informed by their life. And that life is something that is out of your hands, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason that people are so concerned about, getting back to the tech thing, tech reviews, great reviews will come in for, say, a pair of headphones, right? There's not a lot of, divergence on that.
Yeah, there's nowhere you can go.
So psychologically, I think people look at video games and go, when there's a divergence, it I don't know. They just feel like, well, there shouldn't be a divergence here. Like, everybody agrees this is a really great video game, which shouldn't necessarily be the case. Another thing about video game reviews, they're a living platform more than ever. And, I mean, just look at when Drive Club came out. It was broken. It was a mess. It didn't have a lot of things. And then now, like, by all accounts, it's a much better game, right? Yeah. Like, games change a lot. From year to year, which is kind of why we were doing this series over on US Gamer, Does It Hold Up? Where we kind of revisit a game that we like reviewed a year ago and go, okay, well, what's changed? What's new? What's old? Does this work? Has this been fixed? Sometimes it has, sometimes it hasn't. But more than ever, games, like, you can't just rely on one snapshot to see what you think of a game. And unfortunately, what that means is if you're going to go out and buy a game now, like, the best way to find out what the state of the game is YouTube, Reddit, maybe not Steam reviews, but...
No, probably not.
But those are a much more accurate gauge of where a game is at any given time than a launch review, which I guess is saying that...
we're out of a job.
But a video game journalist, ideally, should be able to revisit these games after the fact and go, okay, well, with the benefit of perspective and hindsight and also an ability to look at where the game's community and where the tech is right now, well, this is what I think of the game now, and I'm updating my recommendation, or not updating it. Some games are just amazing, like, even a couple years later, see Shovel Knight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, for me, I want to ask people, if you sign this petition, why does that number matter so much to you? I'm just curious as to why that matters to your life. Why does that make you happier if the number is bigger?
Tribalism.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to know, is there a way to articulate it, or is it just kind of like a lizard brain impulse where it's like, that's my thing that I like and I want it to do good? But ultimately, I am very uncomfortable with my review affecting a person's job or life. And I really wish that wasn't the case, because I'm sure on a lot of the bad games I played, the person doing the audio engineering worked really hard. The person doing the textures worked really hard. The music too, things like that. And with how, so let me get on my soapbox. Workers' rights are terrible in the video game industry. That's all true. There are really no unions or anything like that. It's all like gig economies and things like that. So I don't want my score to affect the person's life. Again, but I'm part of this system that I can't break out of, and I do have guilt when I'm reviewing a game poorly. Like, I really hope this doesn't hurt anybody. Well, so it's terrible for me.
If it makes you feel better, Bob, Metacritic is probably a metric that won't last that much longer, because frankly, it's a really outdated metric.
Yeah.
That doesn't take into account, say, YouTube reviewers.
That's true.
Doesn't take into account how people learn about games now. Yeah, there are a lot of people, like, there are review threads. There are people who find out what a game, find out about games through the traditional means still. And video game reviews do still matter in their own way. They still get a lot of clicks. They still get a lot of views. But I would wager that the average person who wants to know whether or not a game is good will go onto YouTube and type in Star Fox gameplay. And they will watch it and go, that looks fun. Or, and then they might Google a thing and see, like, okay, like, a lot of people seem to like it. I suppose Metacritic would fit into that. But it's not like it was, say, 10 years ago, where you would, that was like the end all and be all. Things have shifted quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd still go to Metacritic, but I'm old.
If anything,
I'm not.
If I get the final words, I think Metacritic is good, if only to act as an assembly of everything you can read about that game that's been printed. It's good. It's good to start there. Don't end there. Read the reviews. Try to dismiss the number that's flashing in front of your eyes, and it's just good to get a lot of different opinions about something. And if a reviewer is doing their job, they're not just telling you about the game; they're telling you where they're coming from, how they're approaching it, what their experience is. And I think that's very important for a review. Just because it's like, you don't know who I am, here's what I am, and here's what I value, and this is why I did or didn't like the game.
Nadia, we were steamrolling you a little bit. What were you saying?
I have a very short memory, so I don't even remember.
It's okay.
But actually, just to add to Bob's point, I kind of agree with him. I always feel bad about giving poor reviews, because as a matter of personal preference, I very, very rarely give like the lowest score possible to a game, because if a game exists in a space, that's a good start. But
your game didn't poison me.
It didn't poison me. Can I control it? You know, that sort of thing. I kind of escalate as I go. Like, does it work? Can I control it? I guess this all comes from me, like, reviewing mobile games where very often something is just outright broken. But even so, I have had people, like, when I review a game, honestly, they write to me and say, "You've ruined my life." And it's like, holy crap.
You've had people say that?
I've had people say that for my mobile reviews, yes.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, here's the thing. At the end of the day, you're making a recommendation, right? And
yeah. And I'm never
in that regard, it kind of is a Consumer Reports. And so you're going, okay, well, should you play this game? Should you not play this game? Well, okay, well, here are all the flaws. And as a professional reviewer, I'm sorry that it is not up to snuff, but frankly, I can't recommend it. And that may end up hurting some people's livelihoods. But unfortunately, that comes with the territory, setting ourselves up as gatekeepers. So
yeah,
shrug.
Yes, that's our final analysis. Shrug. We're still trying to figure it out. Again, it's an imperfect system, but
people might lose their bonuses. Shrug. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No,
please don't take reviews so seriously.
The world is terrible.
Wait, does President Obama have to address this petition if it gets enough signatures?
No. Maybe.
If it's on change.org, I thought so. I'd like to see that, like a press conference. Like, no, I've never played this game because I'm busy.
I know that if it were in the UK...
Okay, thanks.
I know that if you're in the UK, I'm pretty sure that if a petition gets enough signatures, that it has to be debated on the floor of the House of Commons or whatever.
That's amazing.
I imagine it involves jousting, but I went to public school, so...
How's it work in Canada, Nadia? Do they have to bring it to the Queen if there's a petition or something?
Ultimately, the Queen has to sign off on our laws and stuff like that, but
that's nice of her.
Petitions for like video games, I don't think she has much say in any of that.
I want to see the Queen look at
Trudeau's a nerd, so he
Uncharted
might. Trudeau's a nerd, so he might be more into like the whole like, does this game suck? Oh,
he's dreamy, that Trudeau.
He looks like Professor Sycamore. He's so cute.
So with that scathing political analysis, we will end our show. Thank you so much for watching From Us to You. If you want to listen to it, we also have an audio version. You can subscribe to it on any of your podcast programs, iTunes, Downcast, any of them. You don't need iTunes, but you should review us on iTunes. That'd be great too. Those help out a lot. And we're going to be doing this every week, so please check it out on our YouTube channel or on your podcast feed. And as far as plugs go, I am Bob Servo on Twitter. You can read my stuff on US Gamer, of course. And I have another podcast called Talking Simpsons. I'm sure you know that by now, but it's a chronological Simpsons exploration. And look it up on your iTunes or whatever. It's fun. You guys, please let me know, where can we find you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Kat Bailey, and I'm at _CatBot. And check out my RPG podcast, Axe of the Blood God.
Oh, wait, Retronauts, too. Retronauts. I do that, too, don't I?
Too. Yeah, I suppose you do. You do too many things, Bob.
Oh, yeah, Kat, you and I have one of the two of the top 10 podcasts worth listening to, according to Uproxx.
Oh, yeah, we do. Thank you, Uproxx.
I've been much more proud about that, in annoying ways, probably.
Recognition, yes.
I'm Naughty at Naughty Oxford on Twitter, one word, very easy. I'm also co-hosting a lot with Kat on Axe of the Blood God. That's been a lot of fun. When I'm not writing words for US Gamer, you can get me at tinygirltinygames.com, where I just kind of kibitz about games, mostly small games, but big games sometimes.
We'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining us. Later.
Later.